Dim your lights. Pull your blanket a little closer. Let the noise of the day fade away. Tonight, I want you to travel with me. Not by train, not by plane, but through the doorway of imagination. Welcome to ancient dreams, where history is not just told, but lived. If you enjoy this little journey, if you find yourself drifting into the world I paid for you, then please, like this video, share it with someone who loves history as much as you do, and maybe subscribe to my channel, only if you feel my effort is worth your time. Because tonight we begin a story that's been waiting thousands of years to be told. Now, close your eyes and come with me. Long before the towering palaces, the silk trade, and the poetry that echoed through time, there was a land that shaped its people and gave the eyes to one of the world's most enduring civilizations. Ancient China did not begin with emperors and armies. It began with rivers, soil, and the rhythm of nature. To understand the lifestyle of its people, we must first imagine the land itself. Because the land was the silent teacher, the guiding hand that shaped traditions, beliefs, and ways of life. Picture the Great Yellow River, known as China's sorrow because of its unpredictable floods, and the Yangtze River, wide and life-giving, cutting through valleys and mountains. Along their fertile banks, early communities settled, planting millet in the north and rice in the south. These humble beginnings were not glamorous, but they were the seeds from which the mighty tree of Chinese civilization would grow. Families lived in simple homes of packed earth, straw, and wood, working together to survive the cycles of flood and drought. Daily life revolved around farming, for survival depended on the land's generosity. The people respected nature, but also feared it, for a single flood could erase years of effort. The earliest Chinese families were tightly bound. A household was not just parents and children. It included grandparents, uncles, aunts, and cousins, all living under one roof. Age and hierarchy mattered deeply. The oldest male held authority, and respect for elders became a pillar of society that lasted for thousands of years. Meals were shared, work was divided, and festivals were celebrated together, weaving a fabric of unity that made family not only a source of survival, but of identity. Spirituality was woven into daily life. The people of ancient China believed that unseen forces influenced their world. They honored their ancestors, believing that the spirits of the dead watched over the living and could bring fortune or misfortune. Families kept small altars, offering food, incense, and prayers to those who came before them. This belief in the power of ancestors tied generations together, making the past a living presence in the present. The idea that family did not end with death, but stretched across time, gave the Chinese people a deep sense of belonging to something greater than themselves. But life was not only about survival and ritual. Even in these early times, there was creativity, expression, and the stirrings of culture. Pottery, decorated with swirling designs, tools crafted with care, and the beginnings of writing on oracle bones tell us that people longed to record their world and leave their mark upon it. Shamans and wise men read the cracks in heated bones to predict the future, guiding their communities with glimpses of fate. The mysteries of the universe fascinated them, and in trying to understand it, they laid the foundation for philosophies that would later shape the empire. As centuries passed, these farming villages grew into larger communities. The cooperation needed to manage water for irrigation brought people together in greater numbers. With more people came new challenges, disputes over land, the need for defense, and the desire for leadership. Slowly, clans formed alliances, and from these alliances, kingdoms emerged. Ancient China was moving towards something bigger than scattered villages. It was moving toward a civilization. The people adapted their lifestyle as society grew more complex. Farming remained central, but now craftsmen appeared, metal workers shaping bronze into weapons and ritual vessels, weavers spinning silk from the threads of the humble silkworm, and builders raising walls and structures to protect and house their growing communities. Trade began between regions, carrying not only goods, but ideas. Rice from the south, millet from the north, jade from the mountains, and salt from the coast all flowed along the early routes, connecting lives in ways the first farmers could never have imagined. Yet, even as progress unfolded, the heart of daily life stayed rooted in the rhythms of nature and family. Children rose early to help in the fields. Women managed the household and wove cloth, and men worked long hours to ensure food for all. At night, families gathered around simple meals, sharing stories, songs, and lessons passed down from the elders. These small, ordinary moments carried the weight of centuries, for they preserved traditions that would shape the character of the Chinese people for generations. What made ancient China unique was not just the land, the crops, or the tools, but the way people found meaning in everything they did. To plant a seed was not merely farming, it was to honor the cycles of heaven and earth. To bow before an elder was not merely obedience, it was to recognize the wisdom of those who walked the path before you. To honor ancestors was not superstition. It was to remember that life was a chain, unbroken and eternal. And so, in the dawn of ancient China, we see the beginnings of a lifestyle that valued harmony with nature, with family, and with time itself. A lifestyle that found beauty in simplicity, dignity in duty, and meaning in connection. This world was not yet an empire, not yet the China of emperors and scholars, but it was the soil in which such greatness would grow. As we move forward in this story, we will see how these humble beginnings gave rise to dynasties, how daily life evolved with the birth of kings and kingdoms, and how the values formed in these earliest days remained the heartbeat of Chinese life. For the lifestyle of ancient China was never static. It changed, adapted, and flourished, yet always carried within it the echoes of its earliest roots. The villages that once clung to the banks of the Yellow River and Yangtze had grown, spreading their influence across valleys and plains. With growth came power struggles, and from the strength of powerful clans rose the earliest dynasties that would shape the destiny of ancient China. These dynasties were more than ruling families. They were symbols of order, guardians of tradition, and keepers of a fragile balance between heaven and earth. Their rise transformed not only politics, but also the everyday lives of ordinary people. The first dynasty spoken of in legend is the Shah, though historians still debate its existence. Whether it was myth or truth, the Shah represented the dawn of organized rule, a time when clans united under kings who claimed the mandate of heaven, the divine right to govern. The belief that heaven granted authority to rulers was not just political, but deeply spiritual. People saw the king not only as a leader, but as a bridge between the human world and the celestial realm. When floods struck or harvests failed, whispers spread that perhaps heaven had withdrawn its favor, and rebellion often followed. Thus, even the simplest farmer's fate was tied to the ruler's virtue. A Shang dynasty, which followed, left behind more than myths. Its cities and palaces revealed a society already rich in complexity. The Shang kings ruled from walled capitals, commanding armies and presiding over rituals of great splendor. Bronze became the material of prestige and power. Massive cauldrons, elegant wine vessels, and sharp weapons spoke of both artistry and authority. The lifestyle of the Shang elite was filled with ceremony. They dined from ornate vessels, wore fine ornaments of jade, and listened to the steady beat of bronze bells during their rituals. Yet beneath this wealth lay the toil of countless laborers, farmers, and craftsmen who sustained it all. For the common people under Shang rule, life remained rooted in the land. Farmers bent their backs beneath the sun, growing millet, wheat, and barley in the north, while rice fields spread across the south. The rhythm of planting and harvesting dictated the year, and every family member had a role. Children learned early to herd animals or carry water, while women spun and wove to clothe their families. At night, smoke curled from hearths, and families gathered over simple meals of porridge, vegetables, and occasionally meat. Though their lives were humble compared to the grandeur of the kings, there was pride in the work, a sense that to cultivate the land was to serve not only family, but the kingdom itself. Religion was everywhere. The Shang kings conducted elaborate rituals to honor ancestors and petition the gods. Oracle bones, etched with questions about harvests, weather, and warfare, were heated until they cracked, and diviners read the answers in the lines. It was a world where the future seemed written in the very bones of animals, where unseen forces whispered guidance to those who knew how to listen. For ordinary people, too, rituals marked the passing of days. Offerings of food and wine were set before small household altars, and prayers were murmured to ancestors for protection. Life was never separate from the spiritual. It was a tapestry where every thread, whether of farming, ruling, or worship, was woven together. But time never stands still. The Shang, with all their power, eventually gave way to the Zhou, who claimed that the Shang had lost the mandate of heaven through corruption and cruelty. The Zhou expanded the idea of heaven's will, teaching that rulers must govern with virtue and justice to keep divine favor. This philosophy reshaped society, embedding in daily life the idea that harmony between ruler and subject, parent and child, man and nature was the foundation of stability. The Zhao introduced the system of feudalism, granting lands to loyal nobles who ruled in the king's name. This created a new rhythm in daily life. Farmers no longer worked only for their families, but also owed labor and taxes to lords. Villages became parts of larger domains, and loyalty stretched outward from the family to the noble and then to the king. Social roles hardened. The nobles enjoyed lives of privilege, their homes filled with fine bronzes, music, and leisure. Culture flourished in the Zhao era. The earliest forms of Chinese philosophy began to stir, as thinkers observed the order of the heavens and sought to apply it to human life. Music, poetry, and ritual became not just entertainment, but tools of moral cultivation. Children of noble families were taught to recite odes, play the zither, and master the graceful movements of ritual dance, while peasant children learned the lessons of endurance, cooperation, and respect from the fields and hearth. Through it all, family remained the heartbeat of daily life. In villages across the land, the same scenes repeated: fathers guiding sons through rows of crops, mothers teaching daughters the art of weaving, elders telling stories by the fire, and children listening wide-eyed to tales of heroes and ancestors. Even as dynasties rose and fell, these small acts of daily living carried forward the values of respect, hard work, and harmony. The transition from scattered villages to organized dynasties had reshaped the land. Life was no longer just about survival. It was about order, ritual, and meaning. People now lived within a structure larger than themselves, bound by duty to family, Lord, and heaven. The world was changing, and with it, the rhythm of life changed too. As the Zhou era deepened, cracks began to appear. Noble families grew powerful and ambitious, challenging the authority of the king. Rival states emerged, each seeking dominance, and the land that once seemed united under heaven now fractured into many competing powers. And with this division came both conflict and creativity. The stage was being set for one of the most dramatic periods in ancient China's history, a time when war and philosophy walked hand in hand, reshaping the destiny of the people. The Zhou dynasty had promised order under the mandate of heaven, but time eroded that promise. Noble families, once loyal vassals of the king, grew restless with ambition. They commanded their own armies, collected taxes, and began to act as kings in their own right. The Zhou kings, though still honored in name, held little true power. The land fractured into rival states, and soon China was no longer a unified kingdom, but a battlefield of competing domains. This period, imagine life in those days. Across the countryside, peasants still bent over their fields, but they now lived under the constant shadow of war. Armies marched across plains, destroying crops and burning villages. Families fled their homes with what little they could carry, seeking safety wherever it might be found. Sons were taken as soldiers, pressed into service for lords who sought power at any cost. The sound of bronze weapons clashing and war drums echoing across valleys became the background of life. For the ordinary people, survival became even harder, their daily routines disrupted by the ambitions of rulers. Yet in this very time of unrest, Chinese society did not collapse. It adapted. Warfare itself pushed innovation. Bronze, once the pride of the Shang and Zhou elites, gave way to iron. Stronger, sharper tools and weapons transformed both farming and fighting. Farmers with iron plows could cultivate more land, producing surplus crops that fed growing armies and bustling cities. Blacksmiths became essential figures, forging not just swords and armor, but the very tools that sustained life. The villages, though threatened, grew into towns, and towns into cities, fortified with walls of earth and stone. Urban life expanded, with markets where goods from distant regions were traded. Grain, silk, salt, jade, and bronze. Even in war, commerce found a way. The people lived in fear of battles, yet their culture blossomed. Why? Because times of crisis made people ask questions. Why does war never end? What makes a ruler just or unjust? How can society live in harmony? These questions gave birth to philosophies that would shape Chinese life for centuries to come. This was the age of the 100 schools of thought, when great teachers walked among the people, offering visions of order and peace. One such teacher was Confucius, a man who believed that harmony began with respect. Respect for elders, for parents, for rulers, and for tradition. In his eyes, society was like a family. If a son was loyal to his father and a subject was loyal to his king, then peace would follow. He spoke of virtues, benevolence, righteousness, propriety, and his disciples carried his teachings across the land. To the weary people, Confucius offered a vision of stability rooted in moral duty. A reminder that even in chaos, order could be rebuilt through human relationships. Others, however, believed that human nature was too unruly for kindness or quiet reflection. They argued for legalism, a philosophy that demanded strict laws and harsh punishments. To these thinkers, only order enforced by fear could save society from its own chaos. Legalism would later shape powerful dynasties, its rigid discipline forging unity where softer methods failed. Imagine the debates of those times. Confucian scholars teaching respect and virtue, Taoist hermits retreating to mountains to live in harmony with nature, and legalist ministers insisting on unyielding authority. These ideas were not just abstract words, they seeped into the fabric of daily life. Families taught their children respect and ritual at home. Farmers, hearing the Taoist wisdom, found peace in tending their fields with patience. Soldiers marched under commanders who drilled them with legalist discipline. Even as the land burned with war, the minds of the people burned with ideas that would last longer than any battlefield victory. For the common people, daily life in this era was a mixture of hardship and resilience. Food was still grown in the fields, animals tended, cloth woven, and homes built of earth and wood. But the fear of war made communities more guarded. Villages clustered near city walls, seeking protection. Families built underground shelters to hide from raids. Mothers comforted children as soldiers marched past, hoping their sons would return. Yet, even in these hard times, festivals continued. Lanterns were lit, drums were beaten, and dances performed. Life refused to surrender completely to war. And in this balance between suffering and endurance, between war and wisdom, China was preparing itself for its next great transformation. The Warring States period, though violent, brought forth the philosophies that would guide Chinese civilization for millennia. It was a crucible in which the Chinese spirit was tested and refined. The people, hardened by struggle, longed for unity, for a ruler who could bring peace. And soon, such a figure would rise from the state of Qin, a king with ambitions vast enough to unite the fractured land into a single empire. As the warring states drew toward their bloody conclusion, the people looked to the horizon, weary of endless conflict, yet carrying within them the seeds of resilience, wisdom, and hope. They did not yet know it, but a new age was dawning, the age of the first emperor, when China would for the first time become a single, united empire under one ruler. After centuries of struggle, chaos, and philosophical debate, the land of China finally found unity under a single ruler. The state of Qin, once a relatively remote kingdom, had grown powerful through relentless military campaigns, strategic alliances, and the strict application of legalist principles. Its king, ambitious and determined, declared himself the first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. For the first time in history, the fractured states of China were bound together under one law, one currency, one system of governance. But the birth of this empire brought changes that would ripple through the lives of ordinary people in ways both awe-inspiring and harsh. Life in the empire was now governed by order on an unprecedented scale. Qin Shi Huang sought to standardize everything: weights and measures, coins, writing systems, and even the width of cart axles. Markets across distant provinces could trade efficiently, and ideas could travel along the newly connected roads. Ordinary people who once measured distance by the landmarks they knew now found themselves navigating a world unified by law and structure. For farmers, craftsmen, and merchants, this meant new opportunities and new demands. The state could call upon them at any moment to build roads, walls, or palaces, and obedience was not optional. The most visible symbol of this obedience was the Great Wall, an immense network of walls and fortifications stretching across the northern frontier. Thousands of laborers, including peasants, convicts, and conscripted soldiers, were forced to toil under harsh conditions. Many families feared for sons or husbands sent to labor in distant mountains, their fates uncertain. Yet, amidst the suffering, there was also a sense of purpose. The empire protected the people from nomadic invasions and created a tangible mark of human ambition. Villagers looked up at the wall not just as a barrier, but as a reminder of the power and reach of the emperor. Daily life for ordinary people continued to revolve around family, farming, and community, though now under tighter control. Fields were plowed and irrigated, granaries were stocked, and taxes were collected in strict accordance with law. Women tended the home, wove silk, and cared for children, while men labored in the fields or workshops. Markets buzzed with the trade of grains, silks, tools, and pottery, and towns along major roads became hubs of commerce. Families who had once lived isolated lives now found themselves connected to a broader, unified society. This interconnection shaped habits, festivals, and even cuisine, as goods and ideas flowed from region to region. The Qin dynasty also placed enormous emphasis on military organization. Soldiers were trained rigorously, drilled with iron weapons, and bound by strict codes of discipline. Villages near the frontiers lived with the constant presence of troops, a reminder that loyalty to the empire was both protection and obligation. For young men, military service was a rite of passage, a duty to family and emperor alike, even in the villages far from conflict. The knowledge that the empire demanded order and strength influenced daily life. Obedience, punctuality, and respect for authority became ingrained habits. Perhaps the most enduring symbol of Qin's ambition was the emperor's own tomb, guarded by the terracotta army. Thousands of life-sized figures, each meticulously crafted, were buried to protect the emperor in the afterlife. While these figures remained hidden underground for centuries, they reflect the scale of vision and organization that the Qin dynasty imposed upon its people. The labor invested in roads, walls, palaces, and tombs illustrates the lengths to which the state could reach into daily life, leaving an imprint of empire on every aspect of society. But the Qin dynasty, like many empires built on strict control, was fragile. Heavy taxation, forced labor, and harsh punishments bred resentment among the people. Even as the emperor tried to unify the land, he could not tame human nature entirely. Revolts simmered quietly in villages, and dissatisfaction spread quietly through towns. The first emperor had achieved what no other ruler had before: a unified China, yet his death revealed the limits of rule by fear. Within years, the Qin dynasty collapsed, leaving behind a legacy of both greatness and caution, of achievement and human cost. For ordinary people, life under Qin had been a mixture of hardship and awe. Families endured forced labor, strict laws, and heavy taxes. Yet they also experienced the unprecedented stability and connectivity of a united empire. Roads made trade possible. Canals brought water and transportation. Standardized weights and measures brought fairness to markets. People began to imagine their world differently, not just as a village or kingdom, but as part of a vast, interconnected empire. The rhythms of daily life, work, family, ritual, were now shaped by the pulse of the state as much as by nature. And so, the Qin dynasty marked a turning point. China had transformed from a land of fractured states into a single empire under one ruler. The lessons learned in this era, the power of order, the value of infrastructure, the reach of central authority, would influence generations to come. Yet, beneath the monuments, roads, and armies, the heartbeat of daily life, the rhythms of family, labor, and community remained resilient. It endured, shaping the lives of ordinary people, even as dynasties rose and fell. As the Qin dynasty faded and the Han dynasty prepared to rise, the people of China carried forward the legacy of empire, a promise of unity, and the enduring spirit of their ancestors. The foundations had been laid, and the stage was set for an era of innovation, culture, and flourishing that would define the next chapter of Chinese civilization. After the fall of the Qin dynasty, the land of China had experienced the extremes of power, order, and fear. The harshness of Qin rule had left the people weary, yet the infrastructure, roads, and ideas of unity remained. Into this void stepped the Han Dynasty, a period that would become a defining era for Chinese civilization. For ordinary people, life under the Han brought stability, opportunity, and a flourishing of culture. It was a time when the rhythm of daily life intertwined with trade, learning, family, and governance, shaping a lifestyle that would echo for centuries. In the villages and towns across the Han Empire, the landscape was a patchwork of rice paddies, millet fields, and orchards. Farmers were the backbone of society, their work structured by the seasons and by imperial regulation. Taxes were collected, but the Han rulers were generally more lenient than their Qin predecessors, allowing families to sustain themselves and even prosper. The fields were tended with iron plows, water wheels, and oxen, tools that made the land productive and supported a growing population. Families worked together, with fathers plowing and planting, mothers managing homes and weaving, and children assisting with simple chores or learning skills that would serve them in adulthood. Life was arduous, but there was continuity, and in that continuity lay a sense of security. Social structure under the Han was defined but not rigid. Nobles and scholars held prestige, merchants and artisans provided essential goods, and farmers supplied food for all. Unlike in Qin times, scholars gained prominence through their knowledge rather than only noble birth. Thanks to the civil service system emerging under Han rule, education became a valued path to opportunity. Children of well-off families learned the classics, history, poetry, and philosophy, preparing for roles in administration. But even in humble homes, knowledge was passed down through stories, practical skills, and moral guidance. Respects the elders, filial piety, and adherence to social norms remained at the heart of daily life, binding communities together. Commerce flourished like never before. The Han Dynasty opened trade routes that would eventually form the Silk Road, linking China to Central Asia, India, and beyond. Along these routes, silk, paper, spices, jade, and precious metals traveled thousands of miles, connecting cultures and ideas. Markets thrived in cities and towns, where merchants displayed their wares, negotiators bargained, and people from different regions exchanged goods and stories. Even villagers, far from major trade routes, felt the impact of this commerce as new goods, fashions, and ideas filtered down. For artisans and craftsmen, this was a golden age. Silk weavers perfected their art. Potters and metalworkers created exquisite items, and painters and calligraphers refined techniques that celebrated both utility and beauty. Family life remained central to Han society. Households were multi-generational, and filial piety governed interactions. Children were taught from a young age to honor their parents and ancestors, to contribute to family labor, and to uphold the family's reputation. Festivals punctuated the year, marking planting and harvest, religious observances, and cultural celebrations. Lanterns lit the streets during holidays, drumbeats echoed in village squares, and songs and dances passed from generation to generation. Daily routines, farming, cooking, weaving, education, and worship were enriched by ritual and ceremony, giving ordinary life a rhythm that blended practicality with cultural depth. The Han period also witnessed remarkable advancements in technology and innovation. Mortar mills ground grain efficiently, iron tools revolutionized agriculture, and paper, an invention that would transform human communication, began to circulate. Roads and canals connected cities, allowing goods, soldiers, and officials to travel faster than ever before. Medicine, astronomy, and mathematics advanced as scholars studied the world systematically. These developments shaped daily life in subtle ways. Food was more abundant, trade was more efficient, and knowledge became more accessible. Ordinary people benefited from these innovations, even as they continued to labor in fields, workshops, and households. Despite stability and prosperity, life was not without challenges. Families could still face famine, illness, or conscription. Villages near the empire's borders experienced occasional raids or conflicts. But compared to the warring states and Qin periods, life under the Han offered a remarkable degree of security and predictability. Communities were tightly knit, tied together by shared labor, local governance, and moral values. People understood their place within the family, a village, and the empire, and this understanding provided both structure and resilience. Cultural life under the Han reflected both continuity and expansion. Literature flourished, with historians documenting events, poets capturing emotion, and philosophers exploring ethics and governance. Music, dance, and theatrical performances entertained both the elite and common people, while artisans produced works that celebrated the empire's grandeur. Architecture combined practicality with elegance. Homes were designed to suit the climate. Palaces reflected imperial authority, and city walls protected growing urban centers. Life was vibrant, and people engaged with it fully, finding meaning in work, family, art, and ritual. The Han Dynasty's legacy was more than political. It established patterns of daily life, social norms, and cultural practices that endured for centuries. Ordinary people learned that their labor had value, their traditions had meaning, and their lives were part of a larger, interconnected society. The empire encouraged growth and innovation, but never fully replaced the rhythms of family, community, and nature. These rhythms, seasonal work, familial duties, rituals, and festivals, remained the pulse of society, even as roads, walls, and trade routes connected them to a broader world. By the end of the Han period, China had expanded its influence across vast territories. Its people had experienced stability, prosperity, and the benefits of a unified empire. They had learned to navigate the challenges of authority, to participate in a structured society, and to value education, art, and innovation. Life had become a balance between the demands of the empire and the enduring traditions of home and family, between work and celebration, order and creativity. And within this balance, the people of Han China found a sense of identity, continuity, and hope that would carry them into future generations. As the Han Dynasty eventually gave way to periods of division and upheaval, the foundations it laid, social structure, family values, trade networks, and cultural achievements remained. The lifestyle of ordinary people, shaped by centuries of adaptation and resilience, endured. And though dynasties would rise and fall, the heartbeat of Chinese daily life, the rhythm of work, family, ritual, and community, continued, echoing the lessons of the past, even as new chapters of history awaited. With the Han Dynasty's consolidation of power and its expansion across vast territories, China's influence reached far beyond its borders. Roads carved through mountains and rivers, connecting cities and villages in a network of trade routes that would later be known as the Silk Road. For ordinary people, life now began to intertwine, not just with family, farm, and village, but with distant lands, foreign merchants, and exotic goods. Trade routes brought new opportunities, new ideas, and a glimpse of a world much larger than the fields and towns they had known. Imagine a village along the Silk Road, dust rising from the road as caravans of camels and horses pass through, laden with silk, spices, glassware, and precious stones. Merchants speak in unfamiliar tongues, showing fabrics of vibrant colors and goods of strange design. Farmers, potters, and weavers bring their own products to trade, exchanging the fruits of their labor for items they had never seen before. Incense from Arabia, horses from Central Asia, dyes from India. Life becomes a rhythm not only of planting and harvest, but of commerce and exchange, of negotiation and curiosity. People discover that their world is bigger than the horizon they had always known. The expansion of trade did more than enrich the economy. It influenced culture and lifestyle. Food, clothing, and daily habits began to shift subtly as new ingredients and materials entered Chinese life. Spices made their way into kitchens, altering flavors. Foreign fabrics inspired local weavers. Artistic motifs traveled along with traders, influencing pottery, silk patterns, and even architecture. Music from distant lands reached city squares, and storytelling absorbed tales from travelers who brought legends of deserts, mountains, and foreign courts. People's imagination grew alongside their commerce, their lives infused with a sense of possibility and connection. Yet daily life in villages and towns remained grounded in tradition. Farmers still followed the cycles of planting and harvesting, the seasons dictating the rhythm of work. Families continued to live in multi-generational households, teaching children respect for elders and ancestors, weaving these lessons into every aspect of daily life. Women maintained homes, spun and wove silk, and raised children, while men tended fields, orchards, or trade workshops. Even with the influx of new goods and ideas, the core of family life, rituals, shared meals, moral guidance, remained central to society. Festivals and celebrations, often tied to agricultural cycles or historical events, brought communities together, reinforcing bonds that transcended wealth or social rank. Education and scholarship also flourished alongside trade. Urban centers housed libraries, academies, and schools where young men learned history, philosophy, calligraphy, and the arts of administration. Confucian ideals continued to shape behavior and governance, guiding not only rulers, but also everyday social interactions. Scholars became advisors, bureaucrats, and teachers, spreading knowledge across regions. Ordinary people might never enter an academy, but they were influenced by these ideas in subtle ways. Through the way leaders ruled, festivals were conducted, or justice was administered. Education and scholarship also flourished alongside trade. Urban centers housed libraries, academies, and schools where young men learned history, philosophy, calligraphy, and the arts of administration. Confucian ideals continued to shape behavior and governance, guiding not only rulers, but also everyday social interactions. Scholars became advisors, bureaucrats, and teachers, spreading knowledge across regions. Ordinary people might never enter an academy. Art and craftsmanship reached new heights during this period. The demand for silk, ceramics, bronze, and jade encouraged artisans to refine techniques and innovate designs. Silk, in particular, became a symbol of China, desired across continents. Ordinary villagers might contribute to its production, tending mulberry trees, raising silkworms, spinning threads. But their labor connected them directly to a network that stretched from east to west. In this way, the work of the common people gained global significance, tying their daily routines to events far beyond their villages. Even religion and spiritual life evolved as cultures mingled. Buddhism, introduced through the Silk Road from India, began to take root. Temples were built, monks traveled, and villagers encountered new ideas about morality, meditation, and the afterlife. People adapted these beliefs alongside traditional ancestor worship and Taoist practices, creating a spiritual landscape that was both diverse and familiar. Rituals, festivals, and daily offerings incorporated these influences, enriching the tapestry of ordinary life. Life along the Silk Road was not without danger or hardship. Caravans faced bandits, deserts, and harsh climates. Villagers feared conscription or tax demands to support trade and military campaigns. Yet the connections forged by commerce, culture, and communication transformed society. Ordinary people experienced a broader sense of the world, opportunities to improve their livelihoods, and access to new knowledge and goods. The rhythm of life, work, family, celebration remained, but it was now punctuated by the excitement, risk, and wonder of a world in motion. Through these centuries, the lifestyle of ordinary people remained remarkably resilient. Families continued to teach, labor, and celebrate together. Communities persisted, even as cities grew. Roads connected distant provinces, and foreign goods enriched markets. People adapted to change without losing the core values of filial piety, respect for nature, and dedication to craft. They lived with a sense of continuity, knowing that their routines, though influenced by empire and trade, were part of a timeless rhythm passed down through generations. The expansion of the Silk Road and the flourishing of trade, culture, and scholarship marked a turning point. Ordinary people experienced their world as both local and global, rooted in tradition, yet connected to distant lands. The lifestyle that had evolved from the earliest farmers along the Yellow River now embraced the vastness of empire, commerce, and culture. And as the later dynasties rose and fell, these rhythms endured. Family, work, community, and ritual remained the heartbeat of life, guiding generations through times of stability, upheaval, and opportunity. By the end of this era, the people of China had learned to live not only within the cycles of nature and family, but also within the currents of commerce, culture, and ideas that spanned continents. Their lives were richer, more complex, and more connected than ever before. And as new dynasties emerged, carrying forward the legacies of trade, governance, and culture, ordinary people continued to shape the story of ancient China through their enduring daily lives. As centuries passed, China entered an era of unprecedented cultural and economic flourishing under the Tang and Song dynasties. The lessons of earlier empires, the Qin's centralization, the Han's stability, and the Silk Road's connectivity had created a world ready for transformation. Cities expanded, trade flourished, and innovation reshaped daily life. For ordinary people, this period was a time of excitement, opportunity, and engagement with culture. Yet it remained deeply rooted in the rhythms of family, work, and tradition. Tang Dynasty cities were vibrant centers of activity, with markets bustling from dawn to dusk. Imagine streets lined with merchants calling out their wares: silks, teas, spices, ceramics, and exotic goods from the far reaches of Asia. Street performers, musicians, and storytellers entertained crowds, bringing color and sound to daily life. Citizens navigated crowded lanes, carrying baskets of food or tools, greeting neighbors, and attending local festivals. Families lived in tightly knit communities, often in multi-story courtyard homes where generations shared space, chores, and responsibilities. Despite the growth of cities, the bond of family remained the anchor of life. Commerce was not limited to urban centers. In villages across the countryside, ordinary people engaged in farming, weaving, pottery, and trade. Rice paddies and tea gardens produced food and goods for local use and export. Artisans crafted porcelain and lacquerware, silk weavers honed their skills, and blacksmiths forged tools and implements. Even in rural areas, the benefits of trade and technology reached ordinary lives. Water-powered mills, improved plows, and irrigation techniques made farming more productive, while roads and river networks allowed surplus goods to travel to distant markets. The Song dynasty, in particular, brought innovations that reshaped daily life. Paper money emerged, replacing bulky coins and simplifying trade. Printing technology spread knowledge, allowing books, literature, and educational materials to reach towns and villages. Ordinary people could access stories, poems, and practical guides, enriching their understanding of the world. Urban centers saw the rise of tea houses, inns, and shops, where people gathered not just to trade, but to socialize, exchange ideas, and enjoy leisure. Festivals became larger, more colorful, and more elaborate, blending music, dance, and ritual into communal celebration. Education and scholarship flourished alongside these economic changes. The civil service examination system became more formalized, providing a path for talented individuals to rise based on merit rather than birth. Families encouraged sons, and occasionally daughters, to learn calligraphy, classics, and mathematics, understanding that knowledge could lead to opportunity. Even those who remained farmers or artisans were influenced by the ideas circulating through towns and marketplaces, absorbing ethics, stories, and innovations that shaped their worldview. Religious and philosophical life continued to guide daily routines. Confucian ideals reinforced the importance of family, social hierarchy, and moral conduct. Taoism offered a way to find balance, harmony, and connection with nature. Buddhism, long introduced via the Silk Road, now flourished more widely, inspiring temples, sculptures, and rituals that involved entire communities. Ordinary villagers visited temples to pray, offered incense to ancestors, and participated in local ceremonies that blended traditions into a shared cultural rhythm. These practices provided comfort, guidance, and a sense of continuity amidst the rapid changes of city life and commerce. Technological advancement transformed ordinary work. Farmers benefited from faster plowing, improved irrigation, and new crop varieties, increasing productivity. Artisans perfected porcelain, refined metalwork, and expanded silk production. The invention of the compass, gunpowder, and advanced shipbuilding under the Song would eventually extend Chinese influence across seas and continents. Even children, while helping in the fields or homes, learned skills that reflected these innovations: spinning silk, grinding grain, or observing the stars for planting seasons. Knowledge became both practical and cultural, connecting daily labor with broader progress. Despite urban growth and technological innovation, life was not free from challenges. Cities faced crowding, fires, and occasional disease, while villages contended with floods, droughts, and tax demands. Military campaigns at the empire's borders meant that young men could be conscripted into service. Yet, the resilience of ordinary people allowed communities to endure and thrive. Cooperation, family ties, and shared labor remained essential, ensuring that social bonds persisted even in bustling urban centers or during periods of hardship. Cultural life reached its zenith. Poetry, painting, and music were not exclusive to the elite. Public performances, street art, and communal celebrations allowed ordinary people to engage with creativity. Tea culture became a daily ritual, both in homes and public tea houses. Markets were filled not just with goods, but with conversation, laughter, and music. Ordinary life was rich, a blend of labor, family, trade, ritual, and leisure. The people of Tang and Song China lived fully, participating in a world that had grown larger, faster, and more connected than ever before, yet remained anchored in tradition. By the end of the Song Dynasty, China had become a society where ordinary people experienced both continuity and innovation. Families maintained their rituals, social hierarchies were respected, and daily work persisted, but the scope of their world had expanded. Trade, technology, urban life, and culture shaped experiences, broadened horizons, and enriched ordinary existence. The lifestyle of China's people had evolved over centuries, adapting to empires, commerce, and as dynasties continued to rise and fall, the lessons of the Tang and Song periods endured. Innovation could coexist with tradition. Cities could thrive alongside villages, and ordinary people could participate in both the labor and the cultural richness of their society. These were not just historical achievements. They were lived experiences, shaping the character, values, and resilience of generations. The story of daily life, ever-changing yet ever familiar, continued onward, ready to enter the next chapters of China's long and remarkable history. As the Song dynasty faded, China entered a new era of change and foreign influence. The Mongol Empire, vast and formidable, swept across the land, establishing the Yuan dynasty under Kublai Khan. For ordinary people, life under the Yuan was a mix of adaptation, resilience, and exposure to new cultures and ideas. The Mongols brought their own administrative systems, encouraged trade with distant lands, and created connections that stretched from the steppes of Central Asia to the cities and ports of China. Life in this period became more cosmopolitan, Yet daily routines still revolved around family, farming, and local community life. In the villages and towns, people continued their traditional occupations, tending fields of rice, millet, and wheat, weaving silk, forging tools, and crafting ceramics. Yet they now observed foreign merchants and travelers passing through, bringing spices, fabrics, and exotic goods. Markets became more diverse, offering products from Central Asia, Persia, and even Europe. Farmers and artisans could exchange their goods for new technologies, foods, or cultural items, subtly enriching their daily experience. The rhythms of work remained, but the world felt larger, more interconnected, and more dynamic. Urban centers thrived under Yuan rule. Cities like Beijing, the Yuan capital, became melting pots of cultures, languages, and religions. Merchants, scholars, and artisans from across Asia settled or traveled through these cities, introducing new ideas and customs. Ordinary citizens were exposed to different foods, clothing styles, and crafts, and local artisans learned new techniques from foreign craftsmen. Urban life was busy and vibrant, with bustling streets, tea houses, and markets. Social hierarchies persisted, but the blending of cultures created spaces where people interacted beyond their traditional communities, broadening perspectives and daily experience. Education and scholarship adapted as well. Confucian learning remained central, but exposure to foreign knowledge brought new ideas in astronomy, medicine, and engineering. Ordinary families continued to teach children the values of respect, filial piety, and diligence, while urban children might also learn from traveling scholars or merchants about distant lands and technologies. Knowledge became both practical and inspirational, influencing not only elite officials, but ordinary people who observed innovations in trade, agriculture, or craft. The Ming Dynasty, which followed the Yuan, reinforced traditional Chinese values while also expanding maritime trade. Under Ming rule, China's ports became gateways to the wider world. Ships sailed to Southeast Asia, India, and even Africa, carrying silk, porcelain, and tea, and returning with spices, exotic woods, and precious metals. For villagers and city dwellers alike, these expeditions represented opportunity and wonder. Craftsmen saw new demand for high-quality goods. Merchants engaged in long-distance trade, and common people encountered items and stories from far-off lands that enriched their imagination. Ordinary life, while still grounded in local routines, now included a sense of participation in a world far larger than one village or province. Family life remained the anchor. Households continued to be multi-generational, with elders guiding children in moral and practical education. Women managed households, raised children, and contributed to craft production or trade. Children learned essential skills: farming, weaving, pottery, or merchant trade from an early age, integrating labor, learning, and family responsibility. Festivals and rituals persisted, celebrating seasonal changes, harvests, and religious observances. Even as trade and foreign influence expanded, the heart of life remained anchored in family and community bonds. Technological and artistic advancements further shaped daily experience. Porcelain production reached new heights, with delicate, beautifully painted wares prized both domestically and abroad. Navigation, shipbuilding, and cartography improved, facilitating long-distance trade and exploration. Printing technology allowed literature, maps, and practical guides to reach broader audiences. Ordinary people accessed stories, poetry, and information that connected them to the larger world making knowledge and culture an everyday part of life. Even small villages felt the ripple effects of these advancements, as they influenced farming techniques, craft methods, or educational practices. Religious life also reflected diversity. Buddhism continued to flourish alongside Taoism and Confucian practices, while foreign religions, including Islam and Nestorian Christianity, introduced new perspectives. Temples, shrines, and household altars remained central to spiritual life, but ordinary people now encountered a richer tapestry of beliefs. They integrated new practices into familiar routines, balancing tradition with novelty. Rituals, prayers, and despite prosperity and cultural richness, challenges persisted. Taxes and labor obligations could be heavy. Natural disasters still threatened livelihoods, and political instability occasionally disrupted daily life. Yet ordinary people remained adaptable, resilient, and deeply connected to family and community. Work, ritual, trade, and leisure intertwined, creating a rhythm of life that balanced effort with cultural and spiritual engagement. By the end of the Ming Dynasty, this period of foreign influence, trade, and maritime expansion demonstrated that while empires rise and fall, the lifestyle of ordinary people adapts, evolves, and endures. The heartbeat of daily life, family, work, ritual, and community remained constant, shaping the human experience even as the world around them expanded and transformed. And as the Ming Dynasty's achievements and challenges faded into history, the stage was set for one final chapter in the long story of ancient China, where ordinary life would continue to thrive, innovate, and endure. Following the fall of the Ming Dynasty, China entered the Qing Dynasty, established by the Manchu people in the early 17th century. For ordinary citizens, life was shaped by both continuity and adaptation. While the rulers were foreign, the rhythms of daily existence, family, farming, festivals, trade, and craft remained largely familiar, rooted in centuries of Chinese tradition. Yet the Qing era introduced new social structures, cultural practices, and opportunities that subtly influenced the daily lives of people across villages, towns, and cities. At the heart of society remained the family. Households continued to be multi-generational, with grandparents, parents, and children living under one roof. Filial piety remained the guiding principle, dictating behavior, moral responsibility, and respect for elders. Daily routines were structured around shared labor. Men worked the fields or engaged in craft. Women managed households and raised children, and all family members contributed to seasonal agricultural tasks. Agriculture remained the backbone of the Qing economy and ordinary life. Farmers cultivated rice in the south and wheat, millet, and barley in the north. Irrigation systems, terrace farming, and crop rotation ensured productivity, while domestic livestock provided both labor and sustenance. Village life was highly communal. Neighbors assisted one another during planting and harvest, repaired homes, and maintained local irrigation networks. Labor was hard, but shared responsibility and cooperation made survival manageable and reinforced bonds of trust and interdependence. The Qing dynasty's social hierarchy influenced daily life profoundly. At the top were nobles, officials, and the imperial family, whose wealth and power dictated law and governance. Below them were scholars and local elites, respected for learning and often serving as administrators. Artisans, merchants, and peasants formed the majority, each group contributing to the economy and society in distinct ways. Despite hierarchy, mobility was possible, especially through education, and civil service exams, which rewarded literacy, skill, and knowledge of Confucian classics. For many ordinary families, sending children to school, even basic village schools, was an investment in future stability and opportunity. Markets and commerce thrived during the Qing era, especially in cities and towns along trade routes and rivers. Merchants sold silk, porcelain, tea, and spices, while markets in rural villages offered grains, vegetables, livestock, and handmade tools. Ordinary people participated in local trade, exchanging goods with neighbors and occasionally traveling to larger towns to buy or sell surplus. The rhythm of market life, preparing goods, negotiating, and socializing, was woven seamlessly into the broader rhythm of family, farm, and village. Cultural life flourished alongside daily labor. Painting, calligraphy, music, and literature were accessible not only to elites, but increasingly to ordinary people. Folk performances, storytelling, and local operas entertained communities, while religious and philosophical traditions remained central. Confucian ideals continued to shape moral behavior. Taoist practices encouraged balance and harmony with nature, and Buddhism provided spiritual guidance and rituals. Ancestor worship remained ubiquitous, with families maintaining altars in their homes and offering food, incense, and prayers at key moments in the agricultural and social calendar. These practices gave structure, meaning, and continuity to daily existence. Women played a vital role in maintaining family stability and economic productivity. In addition to household management and child rearing, women spun silk, wove cloth, and sometimes participated in farming or trade. Their labor was essential, not only for survival, but for cultural continuity, as they passed down moral teachings, practical skills, and artistic traditions. Children learned by observing daily routines, participating in chores, and attending school when possible. Play and work were often intertwined, instilling practical knowledge and social norms from an early age. Life in Qing cities was more complex and dynamic than in villages. Urban residents navigated crowded streets, tea houses, markets, and public performances, while interacting with a mix of social classes. Craftsmen and artisans produced porcelain, lacquerware, paper goods, and textiles, often for both local use and export. Schools and academies offered education, while temples, shrines, and communal spaces provided spiritual guidance and social cohesion. Ordinary people moved through these spaces daily, balancing work, family responsibilities, social obligations, and personal leisure. Despite the continuity, challenges remained. Natural disasters such as floods, droughts, and famines threatened survival. Heavy taxation, mandatory labor for state projects, or military conscription could disrupt family life. Yet ordinary people adapted, relying on community networks, family cooperation, and traditional practices to endure. The resilience of daily life was remarkable. Even in hardship, families maintained meals, rituals, and celebrations, preserving cultural identity and human connection. The Qing dynasty also saw the early influence of foreign contact, particularly through maritime trade and encounters with European powers. New goods, ideas, and technologies gradually entered daily life, from imported clocks and fabrics to Western medicine and maps. Ordinary people engaged with these changes indirectly through markets, crafts, and festivals, blending foreign influence with long-standing Chinese traditions. By the late Qing, ordinary life reflected both endurance and adaptation. Families maintained cohesion, work and rituals continued, and communities thrived despite political and environmental challenges. Social hierarchies dictated opportunity and obligation, but within villages and households, practical cooperation, cultural practices, and moral guidance shaped the lived experience. Life was a balance between labor and celebration, tradition and innovation, local identity and emerging global connections. The daily routines of ordinary people were the true heartbeat of the empire, carrying Chinese culture, resilience, and values forward through centuries of change. As the Qing dynasty approached its final decades, the foundations of daily life remained remarkably consistent. Family, labor, ritual, and community persisted as the central pillars of existence. Ordinary people lived within these rhythms, adapting to new rulers, technologies, and external influences, while preserving continuity and meaning. This resilience would guide them into the next era, even as the world around them began to shift more dramatically than ever before. Following the fall of the Ming dynasty, China entered the Qing dynasty, established by the Manchu people in the early 17th century. For ordinary citizens, life was shaped by both continuity and adaptation. While the rulers were foreign, the rhythms of daily existence, family, farming, festivals, trade, and craft remained largely familiar, rooted in centuries of Chinese tradition. Yet the Qing era introduced new social structures, cultural practices, and opportunities that subtly influenced the daily lives of people across villages, towns, and cities. At the heart of society remained the family. Households continued to be multi-generational, with grandparents, parents, and children living under one roof. Filial piety remained the guiding principle, dictating behavior, moral responsibility, and respect for elders. Daily routines were structured around shared labor. Men worked the fields or engaged in craft. Women managed households and raised children, and all family members contributed to seasonal agricultural tasks. Agriculture remained the backbone of the Qing economy and ordinary life. Farmers cultivated rice in the south and wheat, millet, and barley in the north. Irrigation systems, terrace farming, and crop rotation ensured productivity, while domestic livestock provided both labor and sustenance. Village life was highly communal. Neighbors assisted one another during planting and harvest, repaired homes, and maintained local irrigation networks. Labor was hard, but shared responsibility and cooperation made survival manageable and reinforced bonds of trust and interdependence. The Qing dynasty's social hierarchy influenced daily life profoundly. At the top were nobles, officials, and the imperial family, whose wealth and power dictated law and governance. Below them were scholars and local elites, respected for learning and often serving as administrators. Artisans, merchants, and peasants formed the majority, each group contributing to the economy and society in distinct ways. Despite hierarchy, mobility was possible, especially through education and civil service exams, which rewarded literacy, skill, and knowledge of Confucian classics. For many ordinary families, sending children to school, even basic village schools, was an investment in future stability and opportunity. Markets and commerce thrived during the Qing era, especially in cities and towns along trade routes and rivers. Merchants sold silk, porcelain, tea, and spices, while markets in rural villages offered grains, vegetables, livestock, and handmade tools. Ordinary people participated in local trade, exchanging goods with neighbors and occasionally traveling to larger towns to buy or sell surplus. The rhythm of market life, preparing goods, negotiating, and socializing, was woven seamlessly into the broader rhythm of family, farm and village. Cultural life flourished alongside daily labor. Painting, calligraphy, music, and literature were accessible not only to elites, but increasingly to ordinary people. Folk performances, storytelling, and local operas entertained communities, while religious and philosophical traditions remained central. Confucian ideals continued to shape moral behavior. Taoist practices encouraged balance and harmony with nature, and Buddhism provided spiritual guidance and rituals. Ancestor worship remained ubiquitous, with families maintaining altars in their homes and offering food, incense, and prayers at key moments in the agricultural and social calendar. These practices gave structure, meaning, and continuity to daily existence. Women played a vital role in maintaining family stability and economic productivity. In addition to household management and child rearing, women spun silk, wove cloth, and sometimes participated in farming or trade. Their labor was essential, not only for survival, but for cultural continuity, as they passed down moral teachings, practical skills, and artistic traditions. Children learned by observing daily routines, participating in chores, and attending school when possible. Play and work were often intertwined, instilling practical knowledge and social norms from an early age. Life in Qing cities was more complex and dynamic than in villages. Urban residents navigated crowded streets, tea houses, markets, and public performances, while interacting with a mix of social classes. Craftsmen and artisans produced porcelain, lacquerware, paper goods, and textiles, often for both local use and export. Schools and academies offered education, while temples, shrines, and communal spaces provided spiritual guidance and social cohesion. Ordinary people moved through these spaces daily, balancing work, family responsibilities, social obligations, and personal leisure. Despite the continuity, challenges remained. Natural disasters such as floods, droughts, and famines threatened survival. Heavy taxation, mandatory labor for state projects, or military conscription could disrupt family life. Yet ordinary people adapted, relying on community networks, family cooperation, and traditional practices to endure. The resilience of daily life was remarkable. Even in hardship, families maintained meals, rituals, and celebrations, preserving cultural identity and human connection. The Qing dynasty also saw the early influence of foreign contact, particularly through maritime trade and encounters with European powers. New goods, ideas, and technologies gradually entered daily life, from imported clocks and fabrics to Western medicine and maps. Ordinary people engaged with these changes indirectly through markets, crafts, and festivals, blending foreign influence with long-standing Chinese traditions. By the late Qing, ordinary life reflected both endurance and adaptation. Families maintained cohesion, work and rituals continued, and communities thrived despite political and environmental challenges. Social hierarchies dictated opportunity and obligation, but within villages and households, practical cooperation, cultural practices, and moral guidance shaped the lived experience. Life was a balance between labor and celebration, tradition and innovation, local identity and emerging global connections. The daily routines of ordinary people were the true heartbeat of the empire, carrying Chinese culture, resilience, and values forward through centuries of change. As the Qing dynasty approached its final decades, the foundations of daily life remained remarkably consistent. Family, labor, ritual, and community persisted as the central pillars of existence. Ordinary people lived within these rhythms, adapting to new rulers, technologies, and external influences, while preserving continuity and meaning. This resilience would guide them into the next era, even as the world around them began to shift more dramatically than ever before. As the Qing dynasty waned in the 19th century, China stood on the threshold of dramatic change. Foreign powers encroached, internal rebellions shook the land, and centuries-old dynasties were nearing their end. Yet for ordinary people, life continued with remarkable resilience. The daily rhythms of family, work, ritual, and community endured, shaping their experience of a world in flux. Life was a balance between continuity and adaptation, between ancient traditions and the emerging pressures of modernity. Villages across the countryside maintained their agrarian routines. Farmers rose with the sun, tending rice paddies, wheat fields, and orchards. They repaired irrigation channels, planted crops, and cared for animals, relying on techniques refined over generations. Families continued to live in multi-generational homes, with grandparents teaching, parents guiding, and children learning skills essential for survival. Meals remained simple but meaningful, often reflecting the harvest, local ingredients, and culinary traditions passed down through centuries. Life was hard, but the structure as community and family provided security and continuity. Urban centers were growing, influenced by foreign trade, new technologies, and emerging industries. Cities like Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Beijing became hubs of commerce, administration, and cultural exchange. Ordinary people, craftsmen, merchants, laborers, and servants, navigated bustling streets filled with markets, workshops, and ports. Daily life in these cities combined tradition with new opportunities. Families observed festivals and rituals. Children attended local schools or apprenticeships, and artisans adapted their skills to meet the demands of both local and international markets. The pulse of city life was lively, challenging, and full of change, yet rooted in familiar patterns of work, family, and community. Education and scholarship continued to shape daily life. Confucian ideals, long a cornerstone of Chinese morality, remained influential, teaching respect, filial piety, and social responsibility. Village schools and private tutors guided children through the classics, while urban centers offered broader exposure to literature, science, and foreign knowledge. Ordinary people, even those who could not access formal education, absorbed ideas through storytelling, folk performances, and communal gatherings, maintaining continuity in values and cultural understanding. Cultural life remained vibrant. Music, dance, and festivals brought communities together, reinforcing social cohesion. Religious practices, blending Taoist, Buddhist, and ancestor worship traditions, guided daily routines and life events. Families observed rituals for birth, marriage, harvest, and death, preserving a moral and spiritual framework that had endured for millennia. Even amidst political upheaval, natural disasters, and foreign pressures, these rituals grounded ordinary people in a sense of identity, continuity, and resilience. Trade and technological innovation introduced new dynamics into daily life. The arrival of foreign goods, textiles, clocks, books, and tools expanded the material and cultural landscape. Markets offered spices, fabrics, and objects previously unseen by villagers and townsfolk. Craftsmen adapted their techniques to produce items for both local use and export, while farmers experimented with new crops or improved irrigation methods, influenced by broader knowledge networks. Life was increasingly connected to the larger world, yet it remained anchored in traditional labor, family, and community responsibilities. Social structure continued to influence opportunity and obligation. Nobility and officials retained prestige. Scholars gained status through knowledge, and merchants and artisans provided essential goods and services. Ordinary villagers understood their roles within the hierarchy, balancing work, taxes, and communal duties with personal and family aspirations. Within villages and towns, cooperation, mutual assistance, and social bonds sustained communities, reinforcing a lifestyle that was both resilient and adaptive. Challenges persisted. Rebellions, famines, and foreign incursions disrupted life. Yet ordinary people endured. They relied on established practices of mutual aid, agricultural knowledge, and family cohesion. These methods of resilience allowed life to continue, even as the broader political landscape shifted dramatically. People adapted, blending old traditions with new realities, ensuring that daily life, rooted in work, family, ritual, and community, remained the foundation of society. By the early 20th century, China's landscape was a mosaic of continuity and transformation. Dynasties had fallen, empires had risen and faded, and foreign influence had grown. Yet the heartbeat of ordinary life persisted. Families continued to honor ancestors. Children continued to learn practical and moral skills, and communities continued to celebrate festivals and rituals. The rhythms established over millennia, agricultural cycles, household routines, social obligations, and spiritual practices remained, guiding people through times of upheaval and change. The legacy of ancient China, carried forward through centuries of dynasties, trade, innovation, and cultural exchange, was alive in the daily lives of its people. Ordinary men, women, and children experienced history not only through political events or grand constructions, but through the ongoing practices that shaped their existence: tending the land, crafting goods, educating children, observing festivals, and maintaining family and community ties. Life was both ordinary and extraordinary, shaped by tradition yet open to change, rooted in the past yet reaching toward the future. As China transitioned into the modern era, the lessons of daily life endured: resilience, adaptability, respect for family and community, and a deep connection to culture and tradition. These principles, forged over millennia, would continue to guide generations, ensuring that the spirit of ordinary people, the heart of Chinese civilization, remained strong, adaptable, and enduring, even amidst the profound transformations of the modern world.